Welcome back. Let's get into the always hotly contested public sector wage negotiations. Now, the Public Servants Association has received an improved salary offer from government. Thankfully, the group believes that the latest offer and the gap between workers and government is encouraging for further engagement. The association informed its members on Friday that the revised offer included a 5% increase for this financial year. Now, for the latest on the negotiations, let's speak to Joseph Mashigo, who's the chief negotiator for the Public Servants Association. Mr. Mashigo, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, the employer has increased their offer from 4.7% to 5%. How does this compare in terms of the new offer to the demands that have been put forward by PSA, as you have indicated that this is in a step of the right direction?
Good evening, Katleho, and good evening to the viewers. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Katleho, yeah, I think for us, we would like to acknowledge the offer, the increase in the offer of the employer from 4.7% to 5%. Yes, indeed, it's a 0.3% difference, which somehow it's not yet enough. But then considering the fact that there's a package that the employer has presented to us that also talks to other allowances which the employer is willing to increase. So looking at it as a form of a package, we believe that we are not really very far from reaching an agreement. As you recall, that the PSA had made a demand initially of 12%, and the employer's initial offer was 3% when the negotiations started. However, over time, we in long engagements and months of negotiations, we got to a point where we revised our demand to 7.5%, and the employer was at 4.7%. So we then continued with negotiations. By the time we ended the year in December last year, we were still sitting at 4.7% as well as 7.5% as a demand. However, on the 8th of January this year, we did engage, and both parties, after some negotiations, decided to revise and try to meet each other somewhere. So with the PSA now, our demand is sitting at 6%, and the employer's offer is at 5%. So there's a percentage between the two.
So you're edging much closer in finding each other. This may be premature because, you only shared the news with your members on Friday. What has been their response? And are there specific concerns or just conditions that you feel still need to be addressed apart from that 1% difference?
Yes, so we have been, engaging our members in various platforms, including social media and other platforms where we engage them. And, there's been a mixture of, reactions from members. But I think, one of the issues that has somehow thrown a spanner in the works is the medical aid increase. Because of, the high increase that was effected on the medical aid, it has created a situation where now, somehow members want more when it comes to the cost of living adjustment, because some members have seen that now with the medical aid increase this month, that they are going to be earning around 2,000 rand less on their net income. And that is a huge impact, and which then is creating pressure on us to push further when it comes to negotiations, so that at least, somehow they are able to get an increase that is going to mitigate the impact that the medical aid has affected them on. But also, when we're negotiating, we did negotiate also on other benefits, including the increase on the medical aid allowance. However, the offer on the table currently is that for this year of 2025-26, the employer will only increase by MPI, by MPI, Medical Price Index, as it is contained in the collective agreement already. However, they are willing to increase by MPI and a 0.5% in the 2 other years. So when it comes to next year, the increase will then be MPI plus 0.5%, and then the year after, MPI plus 0.5%. And the reason we really pushed on the issue of the medical aid increase is because of looking at how expensive GEMS is becoming for our members.
I mean, you spoke of the all-inclusive package and just some of the benefits that the employer has outlined there. I'm assuming you're referring to the two adjustments with regards to the housing allowance. Which others do you feel are some of the highlights that your members would be happy with?
Yes, as you rightly stated, we are very happy with the willingness of the employer to increase the housing allowance from 1,784 to 1,900. That will then increase the base of the medical aid allowance. And then also, after increasing the base in April, when the agreement will be coming into effect, then in July, as per the collective agreement, provides that in every July, the employer has to increase the housing allowance by consumer price index, by CPI. So the employer will then be increasing it on the new base by CPI. However, that is not the only thing. Also, the danger allowance. So everyone who is eligible, usually in the police, the correctional service, and other departments where employees are receiving danger allowance. So the employer has agreed to increase the base of danger allowance in April to 650, as well as increase it by CPI in July, as well as the special danger allowance will also be increased in April and in July as well. And the service allowance for the police will only be increased from 700 to 950. So because of those movement when it comes to the allowances, it is what, somehow we believe, provides a form of a package, for consideration. But also we must bear in mind that not everyone receives danger allowance. Not everyone also receives housing allowance as well as medical aid. So that is why the cost of living adjustment remains an important part in the negotiations, because there are members who are not receiving these allowances, and they also need to take home a decent salary.
Of course. So how does government's budget and fiscal constraints affect these wage negotiations and just the process in its entirety? What are the implications for future negotiations?
Of course, that remains a serious concern. I mean, we are all citizens of this country, and we understand, the pressure that is there on the fiscus. But I think we are, as the PSA on record, and spoke a lot about that, because we need to balance interests in as much as we are considerate. And of course, it has an impact on the negotiations, because as much as we are demanding more, but we are mindful of the fact that it needs to be affordable. We have really moved from 12% to 7.5, now from 7.5 to 6%, because of the very same considerations. Because every time when we make a movement, or when the employer makes a movement rather, they look at how much will it cost, how much will it require from the fiscus, and we consider all of those things, and looking at the fact that will it be affordable. One of the issues is that the employer is offering the cost of living adjustment on a multi-term. And as you would recall, the unions have demanded a single-term agreement. However, we are considering the multi-term because of the very same fiscal challenges, and they are offering CPI on the 2 outer years, even though we believe that the CPI is not necessarily increase, but the employer should consider at least putting something additional to the CPI. But we bear in mind that there are fiscal challenges, and that somehow we need to consider that as we engage the employer.
Lastly, just then, what are your next steps in the negotiation process? Is there a timeline for when a resolution is expected?
Yes, parties are expected to return to council this coming Friday. So we will be engaging further to see if we are able to find each other, especially when it comes to the cost of living adjustment. And we are pushing very hard, because the intention is to finalize before the preparations of the budget speech can be concluded, because of course whatever agreement that we have to reach has to be considered when the minister will be presenting the budget in parliament. So we really have time constraints. We are working very hard to try and conclude these negotiations, so that whatever we agree on forms part of the budget considerations.
All right, Joseph Mashigo, thank you so much for joining us this evening. That's Joseph Mashigo, the Chief Negotiator at the Public Servants Association, speaking to us there in terms of them finding each other with government, with that 1% being between them with regards to those negotiations.